name is Frank Bubenik, and welcome to the Tualatin City Council work session for July 13th. It's becoming a blur with COVID. Tonight we have a few items on our work session, starting off with the Regional Land Use and Transportation Update for Q2 of 2020.
Whoa!
All right, so is that who's leading?
It's a dog park, huh?
Yeah. Aquila, do you want to screen share or do you want me to pull it up?
Yeah, can you do that?
Yeah,
you have that available?
Yep, I've got it. Yep, I've got it here.
Great.
Welcome, Garrett and Aquila.
Actually, so are you seeing my Google Chrome piece of it?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, I was hoping to move. Actually, let me stop share. I was hoping to find the PDF share. So let me go back to that real quick. Yeah, that's what I wanted to see. All right, view and all right. Okay, I'm in full screen now.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Do you want to start us off, Aquila, and then I'll go through it?
Sure. So good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Aquila Hurd-Ravitch. I'm the Community Development Director, and Garrett is here with me. He's our policy analyst. Tripping over my words tonight. And we're going to, analysis, yes. He does that too. And we're going to give you an update for Q2 of the land use and transportation, and typically what we've been doing is picking out kind of 3 top projects to focus on, and then in your packet you have an ongoing list of all the projects that we've been tracking in the region. So we're going to go through those top 3 tonight.
Yep. Excellent. Well, let's start with our presentation. Here is Q2. So again, to reiterate what Aquila just said there, highlighting some of the top projects for public input, talking about coordination with the meetings that you're at, what we're hearing from the community, and then just kind of to provide that repository of projects you might hear about as you are out in the community or go to different meetings. So the first one I wanted to highlight, I'm very excited about because some of the long-standing goals we've had in this community around connecting transit shuttles and buses and providing other transportation options between Tualatin and areas in Clackamas County, for the first time I think in a while, has a real opportunity of being funded and brought forward. And so I'll explain that here in a minute. So this is the transit development plan for Clackamas County. And to go back to our transportation framework sheet, you can see the decision makers for this are going to be the Board of Commissioners for Clackamas County. But then there's also 2 kind of subcommittees of that, which Councilor Morris sits on, the C4 and C4 Metro. And then there's a technical advisory committee, which I'm our representative to, that supports that. So the purpose of the plan is to, where are there gaps in transit in Clackamas County? And so to fill that, to identify, plan, and prioritize investments. And then it's really, and this next screen will flesh this out a little bit more. But to take the previous, so previous to 2017, we really had whatever was in TriMet's plan or whatever made it to the regional plan is what would get funded when it comes to transit or shuttles. But there's a new shift now. There's a new funding opportunity. And so it's to take a look at what would that more robust system look like. So for your quick kind of transportation planning 101 update, when you think of where do you get money for shuttles and buses, traditionally, those top 2 bullet points were the kind of where it was planned and then funded. And both of those items are really competitive regionally. So in 2017, when the legislature passed the kind of, it's like a 0.01% payroll tax, that changed the way, really, it opened up all this new funding for transit and shuttles and service. And so what it did is that you basically, you had money to do what was in those plans and even more, and it didn't, and it was kind of opened up to where people like Ride Connection or Canby Area Transit or others had much more, could easily access dollars than in the past. And so I'll talk briefly about it. I'll take us back to our beloved transportation chart here before I jump into it. But it was a state pot of money, and they gave a lot of that power down to TriMet for here in the region. And so TriMet set up, it's their board is the final decision makers, but they have a called the HB 2017 Advisory Committee. And I think Commissioner Roy Rogers is our kind of area representative on that committee. But they really dole out how all these new transit dollars are spent throughout the region, and then specifically spent within Washington and Clackamas County. And so what Clackamas County is doing is that instead of just relying on the TriMet or the regional transportation plans to tell them where they should put all this new money, they're coming up with their own plan to not just fill in the gaps, but better negotiate with TriMet or the region on where transit should go. And so they're kind of in the middle of this process. You see the summertime 2020 is when they're doing some online engagement. I've sent emails to you all, to the CIOs. We put it on our social media, and they're really looking to wrap this plan up by the beginning of next year, because that will then transition into what that TriMet HB 2017 committee next spring. They'll be making decisions about what happens in fiscal year 2022 to 2024 with those dollars. So it's a pretty key time in leading into that. So we would just open this now up for if you have any important issues or things you want to look at. I'll just say from a staff perspective, the transit connections along Borland Road and the different services there, we are continuing to advocate for. Anything we can do, we've heard with the Aging Task Force and getting over to the Veterans Hospital in Oregon City and that job connection. And then I think also with Bridgeport Transit Center and the Southwest Corridor and what that means, we're just beginning to see those conversations maybe eke into this type of, how does transit in general in Clackamas County better match up with that? So those are some of the staff issues, but any other questions or comments, we'll take a pause now.
Anybody have questions or comments? Go ahead and raise your hands. I only can see Valerie and Nancy right now, but Valerie says I can see.
I just wanted to reiterate my support for the Oregon City over to the VA, because a couple meetings ago I actually looked up the travel time over there, and it's with our current TriMet system, it's just ridiculous, long.
Yep.
Others? Can't see them.
Can I just request to go back to faces, Garrett?
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you.
No problem.
So Bridget, do you have something, or I see Paul.
Well, no, I mean, I agree with staff as far as I think it's so important to have the connection between Oregon City and Tualatin for not only healthcare access, but also people that are working here in Tualatin and to help offset some of our traffic congestion. So thank you for your work on that. I appreciate it.
Paul.
Yeah. First off, I think one of the questions was if we wanted Clackamas County to present, and I would strongly recommend that the council listen. I've heard multiple presentations at both the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee and the Metro Subcommittee. They're very interesting. The stuff that they're working on is really fascinating. I've had a couple of conversations now with Garrett regarding what we're doing and what Clackamas County is doing, because at one point in time, I was very concerned that Clackamas County did not realize Tualatin actually had the Meridian Park Hospital in Clackamas County, although it turns out they did realize that. They just had kind of not mentioned it. So I've been pretty vocal on it. There's a lot of really interesting things going on. And Garrett, again, great work that you've been doing, reaching out to everybody. And I had a conversation with a couple of staff members from Clackamas County, and I was surprised because they didn't mention Tualatin in their presentation. I was surprised at how deep they were into conversations, including having already had conversations with several of the nonprofits that are down there by Rolling Hills Church, including the Tualatin Food Pantry, the Borland, I forget the official title, but the Borland Medical Clinic, for lack of a better word, and Family Promise, among others that are down there. So it's very interesting what's going on. Wilsonville also has a very robust plan that they're working on, and their head of transportation there has been very involved and very active at all of the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee meetings. He's also, I believe, a member of one, might be the Metro Planning Committee, Impact. And so again, a lot of good stuff going on, and I think it'd be very interesting to get everybody up on the same page if the rest of the council is interested in it.
Other comments? I'm just going to echo what Paul said. The Borland Free Clinic, the Food Pantry, and Family Promise have all reached out, consistently looking for transportation options down Borland, especially Family Promise, because they have a shuttle service that sucks up a lot of their time to get their residents to and from employment areas. So it would relieve them of having to run a shuttle as quite as often as they do. And also would assist residents who need the help of the food pantry to get out there when they're open, rather than relying on a shuttle, running from the library. And of course, the Borland Free Clinic would love to have more traffic to assist more people with their diabetes, blood pressure, and all those kind of critical illnesses that they need assistance with. So I'm all for Clackamas County's effort, just like Paul said, to get some transportation options down Borland.
Yeah, I totally concur with that. I have another question as it relates to getting workers to Bridgeport Village. Do we have sufficient public transportation, do you think, for that? Or do you think we're still need to look at improving that?
Well, I think that's always an area for improvement, especially with how much automobile traffic you have at that current intersection and how that's just going to continue to grow. And so I think where we're seeing with plans like Clackamas County is putting together is that, and you'll see this in the next presentation I'll talk about as well, but the idea that all traffic goes from Tualatin up into Portland and back out is very much shifting to where it's Tualatin connected to Hillsborough, Tualatin connected to Oregon City and around. Those are the major areas of growth that we've seen in the last 10 to 20 years, but we haven't seen as much transportation option infrastructure go and match those growth patterns. So that's where I see this as a key document in helping meet that need.
All right. Just go ahead and continue.
Yep. Excellent. So let's go back to the screen share. All righty. So our next update here is on the Highway 99 corridor plan. As you can see, the different jurisdictions, everybody's on the team down there at the bottom of the page. Because this is 99W is owned by ODOT, a major part of their control is the system that you see up above, advisory committees, the Region 1 Area Commission on Transportation, and then finally the Oregon Transportation Commission. ODOT, through the past couple of months with that project team, has been doing an early look, they called it, really to get an idea on what is going to be this larger study, how much kind of what would this planning purpose actually serve. And so what they found there is a lot of the things we kind of know about 99W, but a few things I wanted to highlight. You see some of the key findings we see on the screen. A lot of people go there for work, for tourism, to the wine country or to the ocean. The unreliable travel not just hurts cars, but bikes or other types of transportation modes. A lot of safety concerns for people walking or trying to cross that, especially in the King City and Tigard area. And then really within the last few decades, you've seen this area just become much more racially diverse and income wise as well. So this is one of these kind of commute, shed, and movement patterns. And what stood out to me here is the point I was just making. You can see the Portland bubble is dwarfed or is really doubled by the Hillsborough, Beaverton area, and then folks just even moving between Sherwood and Tualatin and Tigard, and that if there were really just that mile or two, that if that was improved, that would greatly impact kind of the movement of people along this corridor. Here are the, so we think about this area a lot in connecting people from lower income communities to really high quality jobs that we have in the area. But they're also, in addition to that, it just serves a lot of people who live adjacent to the corridor that are, in higher poverty brackets or of a lower income. What I wanted to call out here, when they looked at who's riding TriMet and where are jobs, that western part of Tualatin really stood out, that there's an opportunity, and I think it's going to be through more service and transit and options, that you can meet the employees' need out in the western part. You see the line 97 you have there. The circles on the left side of the screen are kind of the number of riders, and they're pretty limited compared to where you see some other places in the line. But when you get to the job side, there's some pretty major employers out there that aren't getting on transit. Here are some of the crash areas. And what's really stood out were the high number of fatalities along 99W, especially as you get north there into the Tigard area, and really how King City has to, with an older population and having them cross to get to some of the services and retail that's down there. And then it's already existing in Sherwood, but I would say in addition to what you see at that little area, you have the new Sherwood High School that was built on the north side of 99W. So there's some real concerns about how that was going to be served. So really the next steps are, this was moved forward. It's really awaiting funding on that larger corridor study. As we talked about in a previous update, the legislature had this in the kind of Christmas tree bill. And then when that was shelved with the session, we're not sure, maybe we might see that next session. Well, there is some funding we'll talk about in the Let's Get Moving measure in the next update. But beyond just waiting for more money, how can we address some of the needs that are out there? Our Tualatin Moving Forward project has been doing excellent work, and we're coordinating with Jeff and the Public Works team on hearing what people's needs are and trying to meet that in the short term, but then also plan for the long term. And then when we start a transportation system plans update, that's where we can start asking some bigger questions or really re-examining this area from an investment standpoint on the Tualatin side. So any feedback or questions on some of the highlights of that corridor study?
Can you flip back to Faces, Garrett?
Oh, yeah. Good reminder.
Any questions? Go ahead and raise your hand. I think I see everybody. Robert.
Yeah, thanks. So I participated in a conference call with Garrett and Aquila, representatives from Sherwood and Tigard, and the project consultant, a few others. Was a very exploratory meeting about what 99 means to Tualatin today, but more importantly, what 99W is going to mean to Tualatin 10, 20, 30 years down the road. Right now, we have a pretty good intersection at Southwest 124th, but one of the concerns I expressed was at Cypole, where you've got all those folks that live in Pony Ridge and the difficulty that they have trying to cross 4 lanes of traffic to get across the road. Also, as that far west area develops in higher and better and denser industrial uses, we're going to need improvements to Cypole Road probably as an alternate north-south arterial parallel to 124th. So these are concepts that are 20, 30 years in the making, but they're on the table and they will at least be part of the study to look at that in the future.
Other comments, questions? Bridget?
Well, thank you for this part of your presentation. I just don't think it's any secret for anybody that's been on 99 that there needs to be improvements there, especially the section you're talking about is alarming, the death rates, and good to know. In putting a public safety lens on this is, I think, really important, as well as a connectivity lens. The other question that came to mind for me, which is kind of an unrelated thing, but I was really fascinated by the diagram with the work bubbles. And I was curious if there's anything like that for our relationship to Oregon City. And I'd love to see that in context. I know they're two separate conversations in a certain kind of a way, but it would help me conceptually, because I think it's remarkable. It's very impressive to understand that, and I appreciate the insight on that. That's all I've got. Thank you.
And we can get you those numbers or reach out to, I mean, I know through that Clackamas County study, they're going to be looking at those type of workflow patterns. So I'll get that and send it out.
Yeah, it would just be interesting to see it with the Portland and the Washington County stuff as well, just so that we can get a better idea in that visual ease of understanding what that bubble looks like.
Yep.
All right, just keep on trucking. Go ahead.
Right, our final item here is the get moving the metro measure that would be on this November's ballot. The one thing I want to highlight about this, because we've talked about it before, is that it would establish a place for easier to access money in transportation. So if we think of transportation dollars, the higher you get away, whether the state or the federal level, there's a lot of times just additional review or percentages you have to build into your project. So for example, if you have to use federal dollars, you can mainly add a lot of times about 30% of the cost to your project just in getting it through the federal system. And so the benefit if this would pass, and we can kind of see the parallel in our Tualatin moving forward work, is that the more you can localize dollars, the more you are able to easier access those and put them towards your transportation work. So that's just the piece I wanted to talk about here at the beginning with this. All right, we go back to our handy transportation map. The decision makers on this are going to be Metro Council. So I was a little concerned at first when after the last task force meeting that Metro had set up, whether 99W would make it to where it's at today. So I am happy to see, and we see in all the marketing materials really since then, that 99W and the big circle in our area, although we were tier 2 corridor, we're going to be included in whatever goes forward if Metro decides to refer that. One small update from the bullet point that I have on the screen, and I sent you all notes from the listening session that Metro did with Washington County, but it looks like some of the feedback they got from some of the other listening sessions was to remove the vehicle registration fee from being one of the revenue sources. And I believe it would be to lower the exemption for businesses for the tax that would be levied there from 50 employees to 25 employees or more. So that's kind of where the plates have been shifted a bit on that. The next steps, really, I listened to the Metro Council meeting last week where they did a first read of the ordinance on on whether they should refer the ballot measure for this November, and it was almost kind of unanimous and very quick consent on that. I mean, I think they paused to see if there were any hesitancy with moving it forward or not, but that was it was pretty much all positive, and then they kind of made their comments about it from there. So I'm expecting on the 16th you know, this will be their second read of the ordinance. I'm expecting that that'll be approved to be referred then to the ballot in November. And so we'll just, you know, continue to follow that and provide updates from there. I think I didn't put in a questions or comments slide, but that's kind of where we're at now. I'm done with my piece of the presentation, so I'll pause for that.
Any questions about the Moving 2020
Yeah,
initiative?
I had a quick question.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Thanks. On the revenue, the 3.5 million for the 99W plan, you mentioned that with the revenue they were looking at, that there wasn't going to be a vehicle tax, but there would be a tax on businesses with an exemption for small business. The vehicle tag tax, I thought that was going to be a big money raiser for them. How are they going to, what are they substituting if they take that out as a revenue source?
Sure. So I think they had looked at previously was vehicle registration fee plus tax on businesses over 50 employees. So what they're looking at now is no vehicle registration fee, but tax on businesses 25 and greater employees. So they lessen that threshold to pick up more businesses, basically.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, no problem.
Other questions? Robert?
Yeah, just to put a little bit more flavor on what Garrett had mentioned, the payroll tax is the tax that's on business, and it's proposed to be a floating rate up to 0.75% on payrolls of businesses with 25 employees or more. Also, the Metro Council has proposed to push back the first collection on that to, I think, 2022, and would issue revenue bonds if the measure passes to fund a big chunk of the Southwest Corridor up front. And then as money comes in, which is very uncertain how much is going to come in given COVID and everything else, that the Metro Council is building flexibility into their funding to say, if we're going to change out and do, you know, more on one project or less on another, then we'll do that in a public hearing. And that's be the same way that they're going to set the payroll tax rate every year, so that there's transparency on that. Also, as most of you will remember, you had authorized me to testify at the Washington County listening session for Metro. I was in a mediation that lasted till 7 o'clock at night. And when I tried to bounce over into the Zoom room for the Metro hearing, it had closed. So I spoke not once, but twice with Len Peterson of Metro about our concerns about how there's not enough money. And this was in the midst of the battle with the Portland Business Alliance and everybody else about the terms. So long story short, I was basically persuaded that asking for additional money for the program at this time is untenable at best. And so that the hope is that as the project gets off the ground, additional efficiencies will be found, and potentially contributions from other agencies, including the state of Oregon and others. So that's where those things stand as of today. Oh, and one final thing, I've been asked to testify in favor of the ordinance at the Metro Council meeting on Thursday.
Other comments? I can see a handful of people, so can you pop back out, Garrett?
Yep. Oh, definitely.
All right. Anyone else have a question or comment about the Moving 2020? All right.
I just want to say thank you to Councillor Kellogg for all your work to supporting this, and thank you, of course, to Aquila and Garrett for all of your work. But I really appreciate it, Councillor Kellogg, advocating and making sure that, you know, we get the right stuff out here to a place where Tualatin residents can benefit from the impact of this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we just have to get people to vote in favor of it.
I convinced the business community because they're not very warm to this.
Well, and I'll just say too, I think that I think that that it's a project that will help stimulate the economy, and I think we'll see the need for that more and more as time goes by. And I hope that, the business community sees that as well. And we can look at the other areas and how much economic benefit has happened in those areas that have the rail system. So anyway, thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Back to Garrett and Aquila.
Yeah, and I'll just do the last one off of just verbally here. So Clackamas County, to kind of coordinate input into the tolling project, has started up a kind of a sub-policy group, which I believe Councilor Kellogg will be our representative, and then I'll be on the kind of technical group to support that. We had our first technical meeting today, and the takeaway for me was the questions that I heard from you all around just kind of some concern or bewilderment of like why this section of 205 and not why the larger pieces of it were the exact same questions that Westland and Oregon City were both really pushing for as well. So, so I think that's what that says. I did learn today that so ODOT had looked at their first like 5 different alternatives, but for the alternatives that are selected to move forward, they have to go back to the Oregon Transportation Commission to get direction from there. So we will have an opportunity coming up here where there'll be an item at the Oregon Transportation Commission on kind of what areas should be studied going forward. And I think that'll be a big decision if there is interest to look at other areas than what's already been directed to this point. So with that update, just were there other projects on the sheet that you had questions about or would like to see presentations in the future, like you will hear in a few minutes from Washington County with the one of our other previous requests.
Anything? Robert.
I just want to follow up on Garrett's word choice of bewildered. But certainly what I was after I had the joy of reading the original concept study. They had 5 concepts, and one of them was to toll the entire length of 205 and I-5 as required in the statute, arguably. And they came back and said that there were too many equity and mobility concerns. So then they chose a shorter section and then convened an equity and mobility committee. So, I mean, they're defying, in my opinion, their statutory mandate, and I don't have an understanding of why, but hopefully that'll be fleshed out over the next few months.
All right. Any other questions?
I'd just really like to be kept updated on that whole tolling issue.
I believe we have them scheduled, for a presentation at the, right, Aquila, the next meeting or so?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
So, yeah, July 20, yeah, the next meeting, July 27th. So.
All right.
We work that quickly, Councilor Pratt. You ask and we're there. We get them to you.
And we love you guys.
Yeah, no problem.
With that, I think we're wrapped up on this one, and we'll move on to our next item on the agenda tonight. The Urban Reserves Transportation Study, otherwise known as URTS in government speak, by Washington County. Acronyms are everything.
Garrett, are you gonna, or Aquila, are you gonna kick it off?
I can kick it off, yeah. So Jessica Pels from Washington County is here, and I thought I saw Aaron. Oh, and there's Aaron. I'm looking around. Aaron Wardell from Washington County, principal planner for transportation. They can walk us through where the study's at, and just I guess a quick reminder. This study, I've been calling it URTS. I don't know if that's the greatest way to pronounce it. Anyhow, it's been showing up on our tracking sheet that Garrett's put together. And so there was a request, I believe, from Councilor Kellogg at a certain point to get some more information on it. So I think now, just chronologically in time, was a good timing for that, so they can give us an update on where that's at. So I will turn it over to Jessica and Aaron.
Thank you very much, Aquila. It's great to be here. We have a PowerPoint presentation as well, and I'm not sure who's controlling showing that.
If you have it, you can share it.
And do you want to take care of that, Jessica?
Yes. Can you hear me, first of all?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, let me turn that on then.
Okay. And while Jessica's doing that, I will provide a brief introduction for the study. So the first question may be, what are urban reserves? Urban reserves are lands that are designated as appropriate to expand the metro urban growth boundary. Washington County's urban reserves were established by the state legislature in 2014. So a few years ago, Washington County was working on the Transportation Future Study, which many of you who are on Zoom today participated in some way. And as a part of that future study, we took a look at what Washington County's growth would be like over the next 50 years. When we did that study, we assumed development in all of the urban reserve areas because we assumed that the urban growth boundary would be expanded into all of them in that time frame. And we realized that it was an important opportunity for us, with that certainty of where the UGB would expand, to take a closer look at what the infrastructure needs were as these areas are built out. So we had the idea for doing this study. We can move on to the next slide now, Jessica.
Oops, let me get that. I have never shared in Zoom before, so I just moved the thing.
There's always some technical difficulties. So we had the idea for the study, and we applied for a Metro 2040 Planning and Development Grant, which provided funding for it. Some of the questions that we were hoping to answer with this study are, how will future development affect our roadway network, meaning the county's roadway network, but also thinking about the city's networks and what kind of a network they need to develop within these urban reserve areas? Where do we need additional multimodal capacity? And that includes looking at transit as well as bike and pedestrian accommodation in these areas. And how can the county help the cities as they move forward with concept planning to expand the urban growth boundary, and then comprehensive planning once the areas are added to the urban growth boundary? There's certainly a range of experiences that cities have had with bringing areas into their urban growth boundaries over the last 20 years. And so we wanted to provide the best possible resource to the cities as they go on. And then we can go to the next slide. So this slide shows a map of where the urban reserve areas are in Washington County. They're the blue areas. They may be covered by some of the face boxes, unfortunately. I don't know how we get around that in Zoom, but we can provide this presentation to you afterwards as well if you'd like to take a closer look at the map. But the point is, the urban reserve areas are ringing the existing urban area. And some of the urban reserve areas are being brought into the metro urban growth boundary now. Metro Council approved that in 2018. It's been going through some of the state processes since then, but we are including those areas in this study as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Jessica.
Can I
Thanks,
interrupt?
Aaron.
I'm sorry, Jessica, would you mind using your cursor and just kind of circling that I-5 area that's next to Tual, and just for context for.
Yep, this is the, I think it's called the I-5 East, if I'm remembering right, urban reserve in that area. And then Ellickson North.
Thank you.
As Aaron was saying, we have a couple objectives, and one of the primary ones was to facilitate concept planning for the cities. It's really helpful if we know ahead of time the transportation capacity challenges that we might face from increased development there, so that we can really inform the concept planning and know where we're going to need maybe intersection improvements or parallel routes or upsizing of existing facilities to accommodate the growth. So we wanted to really coordinate with the partners, which is the cities, on development assumptions, goals, evaluation criteria, and performance measures. And I'll talk about the development assumptions a little bit in a few minutes. We wanted to identify areas of projected multimodal capacity needs where we might need extra capacity, assess future right-of-way and long-term jurisdiction needs. And this project will also create an infrastructure finance plan template and toolkit for the cities to use. And that's something we've seen a lot of variation in through the concept plans we've seen. And so we thought it'll be really helpful to have a toolkit and a template that has funding mechanisms identified, some suggestions and ways to calculate things, so that we're not there yet, but that's the next phase of this project. This project has a technical advisory committee that's pretty large. It's composed of city staff, Clean Water Services, TriMet, Metro, and ODOT. We've also done quite a bit of outreach. In addition to doing presentations like this to you tonight, we've been to a lot of the CPO meetings. We've been to a Beaverton Neighborhood Association meeting, and we have created a couple of flyers, mostly for our Cooper Mountain Transportation Study, which was the precursor to this. And then this study really took over from there and expanded the scope. We've also talked to several property owners in the area. And then we have a stakeholder team composed of Thousand Friends of Oregon, the Home Builders Association of Portland, the Oregon Department of Agriculture, and DLCD. And we took a tour with them of all the reserve areas and are sharing with them the materials so they can help inform our process. So we kicked off this project last May. We are expecting to work on this through the end of this year with potential TSP amendments, probably in next year's ordinance season. You know, at the county, we have a land use ordinance season that's only March through October. We had 4 main project elements, and we are in the 3rd element. We're wrapping that up right now, which is evaluating potential. So what we've done so far is assess the growth impacts and system needs, and really got started on the partnerships and outreach part. And finally, the last part at the end of the arrow is the infrastructure finance plan template, which will be next. So the work completed so far, and I'll go through each of these in a little more detail. We've developed land use assumptions for each reserve. We have began the travel demand modeling, and we have done actually now the engineering feasibility analysis of the identified projects, which I'll go through in a minute. So for land use assumptions, we started with Metro's assumptions from the 2018 Urban Growth Report, and where there wasn't already a concept plan, we used Metro's assumptions of 10 units per acre. And where there was a concept plan, we put those figures in, and then we refined it through meetings with our TAC and through feedback with city staff. We also, in some cases, reduced dwelling units and added employment to some of the reserves, and that was again based on either concept plans or conversations with city staff. Then the land use assumptions provide the basis for the travel demand modeling. And the modeling is what determines future transportation system needs, at least at the large scale, such as roadway and intersection capacity. We did include 24 study intersections, including 2 down in the Tualatin area, which were Norwood and Boone's Ferry, and Norwood and 65th. So they will be in our final infrastructure analysis report, which we don't have final yet, but we will pretty soon, in a couple months. We do expect that the necessary mitigation will be part of city concept planning. So this project is really identifying and providing the foundational information for concept planning that then informs the transportation system and the project list and things that need to happen to accommodate the development. We did a little closer look at 6 projects, including where Beef Bend Road and Roy Rogers Road intersect. We may need to move that intersection slightly to get out of the wildlife refuge on the west side of the road. The 175th Avenue kink, we wanted to refine that alignment. The Shackleford Road extension to 185th Avenue, that's up in North County. And 185th Avenue improvements between Springville and the future Shackleford, those are up by PCC Rock Creek. The 185th Avenue extension, that would be from Gassner down to Kimmer. That's up by Cooper Mountain Nature Park. And the Basalt Creek Parkway overcrossing of I-5, due to potential development down in the area of Basalt Creek Parkway, we wanted to really be sure of where that alignment is likely to go. So we took a closer look at that. And this is a map showing those projects. So you can see the ones from North County and down through Cooper Mountain area, Beef Bend, and then finally down to Basalt Creek Parkway. The next steps in our project are to finish the travel demand modeling and analysis, and that will culminate in an infrastructure analysis report, which will include recommended future improvements and TSP amendments. We will finally develop the infrastructure funding plan template and toolkit. I think that will be a really useful tool, and I'm excited to get to that part. And I think that's all we have for you. Let's see if I can stop share. There.
All right. Questions for Aaron or Jessica? Or comments? Robert.
All right, get comfortable. I've got a lot of questions. So good to see you, Jessica, Aaron. Great to see you. Thank you for bringing this together. When you mentioned the Washington County Futures Transportation Study, I had a flashback where we were talking about 65th Avenue and everybody else in the room was looking at me like I was crazy, but thank you for following through on that suggestion and bringing that up. So that's my first question about 65th. That's planned to be a north-south arterial running from Tualatin's current city limits. How far down? All the way to the Ellickson-Stafford intersection?
I think so, yeah. I don't
Sounds
have
right to
that
me.
map.
I'm just pulling up the map right now.
TSP here.
Sorry,
Okay,
we didn't have our maps up, Robert.
Oh, I'm sorry. And then assuming that is the case, given that that's the dividing line between Washington and Clackamas counties, is that envisioned to be a shared expense, or is there going to be some sort of jurisdictional transfer? I know that's way off in the future, but is there any thought been put into that?
That's something we've been talking about. So it is unusual because it's the dividing line between two counties. And so typically when that happens, we enter into a maintenance agreement with the other jurisdiction. Either we do it and they pay us or vice versa. One of the next steps of this project will be leading into an evaluation of long-term roadway jurisdiction around the county, which is something that we would want to continue coordinating pretty significantly with the cities about. And so I don't think we have an answer today, but that is something we're thinking about, is what does it make sense to do with 65th in particular? And it's individual for each roadway.
Sure. And shifting to Basalt Creek Parkway and its potential overcrossing of I-5, is that intended to stretch as far east as Stafford Road?
I don't think so. I think what we've modeled is it connecting with Frobase.
Right. So Frobase is the
to
east-west.
65th. And then beyond that, it's in Clackamas County. So I don't think I've heard of any extension there.
Okay, well, I'm just, I know there's a county line, but this is such a broad-based sort of sandbox exercise that, you wouldn't want the traffic to just stop there if it could keep on going.
Right.
Right. And our modeling tools don't drop off at the county line either. And so it's something that we can take a closer look at if we're interested in that interaction.
Yeah, and what mobility benefits that might provide.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of Frobase Road, that's been forecast as the future jurisdictional boundary between Tualatin and Wilsonville east of I-5.
I'm going to turn that one over to Aquila, actually. I'm not sure what the status is of that.
So we haven't engaged in any conversations with Wilsonville around those reserve areas. So I think that would be a future discussion. One of the things that I've looked at is just the drainage and which way creeks are flowing. And so most of that area north of Frobase does drain to the north. So for infrastructure provision, at least for sewer, would make that a little bit easier. If we go too much further south of Frobase, then we get into more pump stations. That's kind of the extent of the thought process, but we haven't engaged in more detailed conversations yet.
Okay, I thought I had read in one of the reports that was at least a subject of discussion, but perhaps I'm wrong on that. Anyway, thinking north of Frobase, what is the proposed mix in land use, or at least the one that you're using to forecast for that area? I know it was originally heavily residential, and then our staff asked to add some more employment mixed use. Do you have a percentage breakdown on what that's going to look like?
I do. I think you may have gotten this memo. I sent it to Garrett. Did you send that out? So it's called our...
Yeah, there were 2 memos we attached to the packet, both that you sent.
Yeah, land use assumptions. So for I-5 East, we are assuming 1,458 dwelling units and 3,128 employees.
Okay, thank you. All right, 2 more questions. A simpler one first, and this may be a little odd because it's actually not in the urban reserve area, but I read from the notes from the second TAC committee meeting that there was discussion about making intersection improvements at Avery and Tualatin Sherwood Road and Avery and Boones Ferry Road in Tualatin. And I was just wondering, is the idea to get some of that southbound traffic out of downtown Tualatin proper and route it over Avery?
I don't remember that conversation, actually. We have not really been looking too closely at intersections that are already within cities or even within the urban growth boundary.
We can look at the notes and get back to you on that question.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I don't have those open.
The last one's a broader question about the Brookman Road extension and making that 5 lanes from 99W all the way over to 124th. Is that accurate?
That is something we've looked at.
Okay. And then in terms of what additional demand that might bring to the Salt Creek Parkway, 124th, Grahams Ferry, Boones Ferry, Elligson, all the way out to I-5, is that part of the future modeling and what's probably going to be a massive infrastructure cost to improve the performance of what is already a terrible intersection at Day and Boones Ferry and the I-5 Elligson interchange?
So it is a project that we included in the modeling, and based on the modeling, I can tell you it does carry a significant amount of traffic. We didn't get into the intersection level operations, particularly of the freeway interchanges, so I can't answer a specific question about queuing or what the impacts would be there, but we can tell you that it does draw a significant amount of demand. Cost-wise, you're right, that's going to be a really significant infrastructure lift for the region. There's also some political challenges with implementing that solution. The road is in the Washington County Transportation System Plan as a 5-lane arterial from 99 over to Ladd Hill Road. Right after that, it enters into Clackamas County, or the land enters into Clackamas County. And so there isn't a line on the map, there isn't a road on the map. And so if we wanted to be able to add that roadway, we would need to add it to Clackamas County's Transportation System Plan. Further challenging that, once it crosses out of Washington County, it becomes a very small amount of urban land, which can be brought into the city of Sherwood. But beyond that, it's rural reserve. And it's against state policy to add additional roadway capacity in rural reserves under most circumstances. And so that's something that we would need to coordinate really heavily with Clackamas County on, and the state as well, to figure out a way in order to do that, if it's the desire of the region and if it's the desire of all of the associated electeds, that is a facility we would like to see implemented.
Great. All right. Well, thank you as always for an informative presentation and even better responses.
Other questions, comments? Paul.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great presentation. And just a couple of comments. One of them is just going to tailgate on Councillor Kellogg, and I'll start with that one first. Your Norwood intersection. Over the last 2 years, I've noticed a huge change in the tone of Clackamas County about the need for more planning, future planning of roadways. They seem, my sense was that they really weren't interested, that it was just something they didn't have time for or were interested in. And I think their vehicle registration program really, and also a neighborhood conversation along some problems with Stafford Road seem to now start sending them in a direction where they're more willing to engage in conversation and talk about long-range plans. So my advice would be, it might be a good time in the near future to reach out to them again about not only that roadway, but the other extension into Clackamas County and certainly in long-range planning. So my other comment is that I was really pleased to see that overpass, Basalt Creek I-5 overpass continue in your plans. I believe that's kind of the key to alleviating traffic on Boones Ferry Road southbound into I-5, the I-5 interchange, and then ultimately the extension of that into Clackamas County all the way to Stafford. And I was also, and again, part of that whole tone from Clackamas County was, it was over 2 years ago when Clackamas County was surprised to learn that there was even a conversation of extending Basalt Creek Parkway that even at the time there were several who had no idea what it was even about or what it was. And now that they have been involved in seeing this plan develop, I think there's an interest to extend that as well, which would also continue with alleviating that huge bottleneck there on Boones Ferry Road and I-5. Everything from basically from Norwood. It was kind of nice over the last couple of months that traffic went down substantially so that you could actually travel it at 4:30 in the afternoon, but the traffic is back and not quite to full strength, but it backs up from approximately Norwood all the way to I-5 to getting onto I-5. So thank you very much for the work you guys are doing, your thoughtfulness in how you're going about doing, and also obviously the outreach of reaching out to the various electeds to get our thoughts, and I appreciate you listening.
Oh, of course. And we have coordinated with Clackamas County technical staff, so our counterparts over on the Clackamas County side, a couple of times throughout this process. But this is a good reminder that that's something that we need to keep up, and we probably do need to check back in with them and see how things are going. I also realized, I think I said a minute ago, that it was rural reserve that the Brookman extension would go through. It's actually undesignated, which is still considered rural, and we have to get an exception from the state. But just wanted to clarify that it's undesignated, okay, not rural reserve.
Other questions or comments? I just have one quick one for you, Jessica and Aaron. So you mentioned the results of this study you're foreseeing getting wrapped up in the next 2-3 months?
By the end of the calendar year.
By the end of the calendar year? Okay. So we'll be able to look at this first thing next year? All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Bridget.
Hi. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I feel like I would just be remiss. I get a lot of communication from property owners over by Basalt Creek where the wetlands are about this bridge, this proposed bridge. Is that part of what you're talking about today exactly? And can you address the concerns and how your thoughts are about the forward motion of that? It just seems very, very reticent by a lot of residents that live there.
So today we're talking about a study we're doing for the urban reserves areas, which are rural areas outside of the current urban growth boundary. I believe you're talking about the Basalt Creek extension between Grahams Ferry and Boones Ferry. So that's within the urban area. It is an active project. They're moving forward on the environmental analysis work and the design work in our capital projects team, and working with the Department of Transportation on that. So that's the current status of that project, looking for funding in order to complete the construction of it. We certainly would be available to come back and do a briefing about that in the future with the right staff.
Thank you.
Nancy.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate it very much. And I just wanted to reiterate how important 65th has become. It is becoming a major thoroughfare and an alternative to I-5. It's chock-a-block, standstill traffic almost anytime you want to look between Nyberg Lane all the way up to where it bumps into Stafford Road. So I think that's a critically important piece of the puzzle. And also I was thrilled that you also mentioned Norwood, because again, that's one of the few east-west over the freeway ways to cut through the city. And it's also becoming incredibly busy and incredibly backed up. And as Basalt Creek continues to be developed and we add capacity there, I think the weight on Norwood is, the traffic weight on Norwood is going to become even heavier. So I'm thrilled that both of those are mentioned as part of this study. And I would just, you know, put my full weight behind those two areas, and just want to reiterate how incredibly important they are to traffic moving in this area, and also the impact of the unincorporated areas and traffic in unincorporated areas, the way it leans on the city and impacts what happens in the city. So I appreciate you guys including those study areas. Thank you very much for that.
Anything else? All right. Thanks, Jessica and Erin, for spending part of your evening with us. Thank you for the update.
Thank you for
Thanks
having
for
us.
having
sir.
us.
Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Oh, well, Robert's not going to let you go yet. Is that just a goodbye?
Just waving goodbye.
All right. Have a good evening. All right. Moving on. We're up to reviewing our council meeting agenda. Any questions on the agenda for our city council meeting tonight? Any questions on the consent agenda? All right. We have one announcement to Science and Technology Scholarship winners. So I'm assuming Councilor Reyes will be discussing a little bit about that, correct?
Yeah, I have it ready.
All right. So we have time for communications during work session. Imagine that. So I'll go ahead and I'll start my screen here. Valerie.
Mine will be quick. You hear me?
Yes.
Hear you. Oh, okay. I have to put my glasses on. Sorry. Mine's really quick. I just, I think everybody's probably aware that. What?
We're seeing the back of your notes.
Oh, sorry. But it wasn't it's just the agenda. So, and I lost my page. Anyway, I just wanted, to reiterate that, everybody's probably aware the governor came out today and mandated that masks be worn inside again, outdoors if you can't socially distance, groups of no more than 10 people. These are mandates at the state level. But on top of everybody, we can't overrun our hospitals. That is the number one concern. We want to keep everybody healthy. But in California today, they just, they're closing the indoor dining in their restaurants. So by doing this and following this procedure, we're also helping our businesses out and, keep them going through this very rough time for everybody. And that's all I have today.
Next up is Robert.
None.
All right. Bridget.
Hi, I didn't have a lot of committee meetings this week. The PAB board meeting was canceled, just so you guys know. I think there's another infusion of money, and I think that we're managing how that's going to happen. I also emailed everybody that that I will be on the Planning Commission for the Metro Housing Bond Program. So the role is to make sure that diverse regions are represented. And, we've talked about that. We talked about that in earlier presentations today, just with transportation to and from services, how difficult it is for people in need in our area to always get out to where some of the Washington County services are, where some of the Clackamas County services are. And so I'm hopeful that I can be a good contributing member. It's going to be a short-term project with 5 to 10 meetings, but I'm really excited to be there and advocate, especially for people in our region and people that deal with issues like people in our region do when it comes to this. So,
can I chime in on that? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So each county is required to put together a local implementation plan that's basically like a contract between the county and Metro of how they will spend the funds. And so Washington County is putting together this committee. And so I'm thrilled that they reached out and are including you on it. And it's super important that that local implementation plan, you know, be robust, and that Washington County really has a good LIP. So anyway, I'm thrilled that you're on it.
Thank you very much. I was very touched when they reached out, and grateful to serve on. It's part of it was because I was on the PAB board, so that's how come I got tapped. So so I'm really honored to serve, like as usual, just like I am as our city councilor. I also just want to say that I want to piggyback on what Valerie said. I think it's just so important right now that, especially with someone who's worked in public health, someone whose family member has been in and out of the hospital just this week with emergency heart things that have nothing to do with COVID, but you know, just to remember, if the hospital system is over stressed, that no one can get access to health care. And I'll tell you, I've worked with plenty of people that have not had access to health care, and people that are used to having access to health care. It is not a place that we want to be. So really, I just encourage people to be very mindful. Don't be afraid of masks. People have worn masks. Surgeons wear masks. People wear a mask all the time and are doing just fine. And I know that there's some nervousness around it, but it's just fine. I've been wearing a mask. I'm fine. And I feel good that I'm protecting people. And we don't know. Sometimes people aren't symptomatic for 7, 14, even 21 days. So just from a public health perspective, I just want to reiterate and also thank everyone. Most people in our city, in our community, have been wearing their masks and have been following these rules. And the things that we know are, you know, hosting parties, backyard barbecues. It seems like it would be safe, but it's really not. These are epicenters of problems of contagion. And just to think about how quickly this spread all across the globe, how highly contagious this is not something to let our eye off the ball around. So we all want to get back to normal as soon as we can, but until it is back to normal, there is this virus, and we have to be protecting ourselves and our neighbors. Thank you.
All right. Next up is Paul.
Yeah, thank you. First off, happy birthday, Frank. Happy birthday to Garrett. Second off, I meant to mention this to you, Charlene, and completely forgot. Then I meant to ask a question during the work session, Frank, and it just got by me. On the presentation, the very first presentation, Charlene, the 2020 Q2 Regional Land Use Transportation Update cover page has the incorrect date. And you might want to, for future reference, update that to July 13th as opposed to June 13th. And then the only thing meeting that I had was the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee meeting. And at this July meeting, typically there's a retreat. And at the retreat, we set aside some time to talk about what they're going to be doing next year for the next 12 months. We didn't have the retreat this year, obviously, so this meeting was focused on that. And the main points are the climate action plan, which I believe our staff, and as I understand, a couple of council members are assisting in putting together our outline for what our city would like and expect from Clackamas County. Obviously, get moving 2020. The Strategic Investment Fund, there was a plan, there was an attempt to, in Clackamas County, to roll that back with a ballot measure. That ballot measure failed to gather enough signatures and has now died. So they are moving forward. Tualatin is on the list to receive funds along Borland Road for improvements between Rolling Hills and the city limits. So that's good news. And then, of course, 205 tolling. There seems to be a general widespread not in favor of any type of tolling at that point. And I know now Robert Kellogg is representing us on that group. And I think we all have I think it's pretty clear on what the marching orders are. At least I hope there's a consensus on that based on what I'm hearing. And then the transit development plan they're going to be working on. And that was about it. There's nothing else unless anyone has any questions. And of course, if anyone ever hears anything along the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee, something coming out of that, always feel free to shoot me an email. I'll be happy to answer any questions with respect to that.
All right, Maria.
Not much this week, actually, or the last couple of weeks. The MAC has not met, or the WCCC, I always forget how to pronounce that one, WACA, whatever they pronounce it, has not met either. So it's been kind of quiet on my end.
All right. Council President Nancy Grimes. Her picture disappeared. You there, Nancy?
She's probably muted.
Okay, there I am.
There you are.
Sorry. I accidentally technologied my way out the door, but now I'm back again. Thank you, babe. Yeah, I don't have too much. I wanted to say the Science and Technology Scholarship winners, very impressive, but I believe Maria will probably get into that a little deeper when we get into the council meeting and the awards. But man, we have really amazing people and amazing kids in this community. I just never failed to be impressed and humbled by that. It's just amazing to me. And also to sort of congratulate Bridget, Council Brooks. Thank you for serving on that committee. That's fantastic. The representation is great. And also just to reiterate, I know masks are hot and stuffy and makes your nose sweat, and they're not the funnest thing in the world, but you know, I live in a mixed household with 3 generations of people, and I appreciate everyone's care and thoughtfulness and the respect that they show when people social distance and wear their masks. So thank you, and I hope we can keep paying it forward with them as we go through this national crisis, and I hope that we can all be respectful and care for each other through this and wear our masks when appropriate. So that's what I have to share. Thanks, guys.
All right. I think that leaves me. Had a few, it seemed to quiet down here for a little bit. A few meetings via Zoom on the June 23rd and 24th. I attended the 3 sessions that the Department of Public Safety Standards and Testing, the Oregon Department of Public Safety and Standards Testing, the agency responsible for teaching police officers in the state of Oregon. They did 3 Zoom sessions. First one was on basic police training and overview of what that entails. They then had a second Zoom session on professional standards taught to police officers. And their last one was on use of force. All those sessions were recorded, and the Q&A was recorded, and you can get it if you go to their website and download it and view it. The basic police training Zoom session was terrific, followed by use of force. Professional standards was good. but to me, the other two are more interesting and enlightening, especially use of force. I want to thank Megan for being my producer, for helping me do the recording of reading Miss Pancake and Sir French Toast to promote our summer reading program at the library. Megan was very helpful in helping me get that done. Today, the Washington County Coordinating Committee meeting was canceled, so got a break from a meeting there. The Washington County Chair Mayor's meeting did take place. Subject of discussion, big one was, of course, COVID-19, and Chair Harrington explaining that Washington County is in no way ready for phase 2. There are 6 indicators on the dashboard that you must meet at OHA in order to apply for phase 2. As of last week, we had 3 of the 6. As of today, we have 1 of the 6. So Chair Harrington saying, no way, we're going forward to phase 2, probably for at least a few more weeks because our numbers are going up. Next subject of discussion was police reform and what the different cities are doing to address that. And I mentioned our project to go forward with the Obama Mayor's Pledge. Tigard has a plan going forward also. And I mentioned to Mayor Sherrato that, of course, Durham will be included in our process since the residents of Durham are served by our Tualatin Police Department. We're going to shift our meetings back to every 2 weeks rather than once a month because of what's going on with COVID in Washington County. So we can get constant, or I shouldn't say constant, more frequent updates of what's going on in Washington County as far as COVID. I registered the Obama Foundation for the Mayor's Pledge is having their first workshop on the 16th for an hour. And the subject of that is reimagining policing. So it should be interesting to see what they present. They have a pretty diverse group of presenters for that 1 hour. Later that day, I think a lot of you saw this, I've registered for the HBA's presentation, the Modern Middle Housing Tour, of what they envision of what the middle housing entails. So that should be a good one to attend. I also want to announce, you all know that Mayor Bemis of Gresham resigned. He was the chair of the Metro Mayors Consortium. He has been replaced by Mayor Truax of Forest Grove as chair of the group. So our senior statesman is now the chair. And you can look forward to very eloquent statements from the Mayor's Consortium, to remember he's an English professor. So, and then finally, I want to give credit to the Metro Area Communication Commission, which Maria represents us on. I had an issue with my former cable provider to the point where I spent hours on the phone with them, had enough of it. I emailed the MAC. They got back to me within hours. I explained what the issue was, and within 72 hours, my issue was resolved by the cable company. So when you have issues with your cable provider, your TV, anything that the Metro Area Communications Commission has jurisdiction over, if you get super frustrated and they are not cooperating, go ahead and go to the MAC, because they can be very helpful and get things resolved. I got a very nice phone call from my former cable provider, and like I said, everything was resolved and taken care of. So kudos to the MAC. That's all I have. This is a rarity that we're done early. So anything else for the good of the order for a work session? All right, so I'll go ahead and close this work session, and we'll reconvene in about 15 minutes for our city council.
I would suggest that you just mute and take off your video and walk away. Don't hang up.
Okay.
Yeah, don't hang up.
Okay. Thank you.
Just mute.